Hello there, viewer. Roller coasters are constantly evolving. Even in the past 10 or so years, more and more coasters are beginning to push the limits of what's possible by experimenting with new and creative elements or entirely unique track layouts that can't even really fall into a category anymore. The evolution from your classic cookie cutter inversions to the weird, wacky and downright amazing new elements of the future is a topic for another video. As today we're talking about arguably one of the most intense inversions that you can find on a roller coaster, the Pretzel Loop. So what actually is the Pretzel Loop? This element is actually the combination of two inversions into one, and as of early 2023 can only be found on the flying coaster model manufactured by B&M, who have been at the forefront of creating the biggest and most impressive roller coasters across the globe for quite some time now. The first thing to note here is that although the Pretzel Loop is exclusive to this type of roller coaster, it wouldn't be impossible for B&M or any other manufacturer to use this element on a different type of ride. However, it would drastically change the experience. You see, the Pretzel Loop is infamous amongst coaster enthusiasts as being one of the most intense moments you'll find on a coaster, which can be seen as a good or bad thing depending on who you ask. But this intensity is mainly achieved through the design of the trains. On a flying coaster, passengers board the train by sitting in one of 4 seats of the row, which then, before leaving the station, maneuver into the flying position, so that you're looking down into the ground rather than what's ahead of you, which is slightly different to how the newer Vekoma flying coaster model works, which uses a slight angle on the seats to allow for the passengers to be able to see more of what's ahead of them. When approaching the Pretzel Loop, the track begins to rise into the sky until you eventually notice that there's track directly underneath you. Before you can prepare yourself, the train begins to follow the now plummeting track, which arches downwards straight into the ground without twisting in the slightest, giving you the strange feeling of a beyond vertical drop with the track like above you instead of below you, which only keeps getting stranger as the track continues to arch around more and more until it's level with the ground and you're facing straight up into the sky. Now, I've only ever experienced one Pretzel Loop so far, which was on Tatsu at Six Flags Magic Mountain, which, fun fact, holds the world record for tallest Pretzel Loop at 38 meters, and let me tell you, the first half of this element is insanely disorientating, as 1 second you're facing the ground, which is way below you, to suddenly just looking up at the sky, after feeling what it must be like to literally just fall out of the battle bus. The fuck you say to me? It's pretty much an inside Raven turn, except rather than packing up and going home afterwards, you're then instantly sent into the second half of this inversion, which takes you right back up into the sky. And well, I couldn't even remember a single moment from this point because the level of positive G-force you experienced during this is enough to cause a lot of riders to grey out, and honestly I felt pretty damn close to that too. It's just impossible to even wrap your head around what just happened to you, but mixing that with the sensation of rapid blood loss due to the forces you've been put through really is that final chef's kiss and a giant middle finger to all of the brain cells you just lost, and you're never getting those back. Seeing as I'm from the UK, land of the Tesco, 49-day reigning Prime Minister, puffer jackets and knives, it's safe to say I was really not prepared for the difference between Galactica and Tatsu, Alton Tower's very own flying coaster that is a pretty solid ride overall. However, yeah, when compared to this absolute beast of a coaster, it might as well just be called Flying Fish. Of course, I am kidding, Flying Fish is way more intense than either of these, but in all seriousness though, Tatsu manages to utilize its impressive height to really create that sensation of flying, which is just on a whole new level compared to Galactica. It's still cool being able to fly past the trees and barely miss the ground with its lower sections, but it just doesn't have any podium to stand on when you can literally feel like you're soaring through the sky with Tatsu. Which I think shows that for a successful flying coaster, it's actually all about the height. Or is it? Well, okay, I'd say that it certainly is for a B&M wing coaster. After all, those giant drops and sweeping turns really are something to remember. However, Fly at Phantasialand, which is a new model Vekoma flying coaster, actually proves that maybe to have a thrilling and enjoyable flying coaster, it's not all about the height after all, but instead can create just as good of an experience with plenty of near misses from the heavy theming, rather than the likes of the B&M counterparts, which focus more so on the intensity. Well, now that I think about it, pretty much all B&M coaster models out there focus on intensity in some way or another. You have your standard sit down and stand up coasters, which always pack a fair few inversions, airtime hills or turns that give off a pretty strong amount of G-force. The floorless and dive coasters are pretty much the same, I'd say, but the ones I've experienced seem to feel slightly weaker in this aspect, but just a lot more smooth. There's also the winged coaster, which is another weaker coaster model, but still not entirely without its moments, and then you get the hyper and giga coasters, which heavily concentrate on the negative Gs in the airtime hills and positives on the way back up, with the flying and inverted coasters definitely packing the most intensity out of all of them. I mean, come on, these things are literally just positive G-force machines, whether that's vertical or lateral, they'll make you see life in a whole new perspective. In fact, the only model that I can think of from the top of my head that might not be purely focusing on forces might be the new surf coaster model. So I guess it's quite fitting that actually one of, if not the most intense element happens to be on a B&M flying coaster, and it shows how brave and bold B&M are at really pushing the boundaries with these things to create the best and most impressive coasters, or at least they used to be. But that's a topic for a whole new video. So would you say that the Pretzel Loop is the most intense element you can find on a roller coaster, or is there something else that just about tops the list? And if so, you might as well comment your thoughts below. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.